Hey, I'm back. After 6 months, I am returning with a new video. And this video is going to focus on very specific type of fragrance, or types of fragrance if we're thinking of subgenres here. Agrestic and bucolic fragrances. Now, I am wearing my bright orange cap because it is hunting season here in New England. It's November. So I just thought it would be appropriate for this particular theme because when we're discussing agrestic and bucolic, we're thinking of things like the countryside, glades and meadows and thickets and wooded copses of all different types. We think of farms. We think of greens. We think of wildflowers. We think of all sorts of things that grow in the understory, the undergrowth. So to give you some definitions, something that is considered agrestic would be literally woodsy or outdoorsy, relating to the country, rural, rustic. And bucolic, similarly, although some people like to make the distinction between the two, relates to these pleasant aspects of the countryside and country life. Other types of adjectives can be used. Pastoral, idyllic, rustic. So you get the idea. And in perfumery, something that's agrestic, it refers to this olfactive family, actually. Heavy, dry, earthy notes like hay, tobacco, lovage, elderflower, oak moss, wildflower accords, herbaceous accords, even unusual left field approaches to perfume that evoke that undergrowth, such as mushroom, ferns, moss, lichen. You name it. You think of anything that grows in such spaces. They're typically characterized as hay-like, barnyard, dry, sunny, or even damp. Some notes, such as oak moss, might skew more in a moist green direction. So we'll get started here. I'm going to get into some detail of 10 of my favorites that would fall into this realm that we call the agrestic and bucolic. And we're going to start off here with a release from 2021, Parfum d'Impair. This is Mal-Aimé. Mal-Aimé was composed by Marc-Antoine Corticchiato, or Corticchiato, rather. I always get the pronunciation a little mixed up when referring to his name. But this one is a gorgeous one. So what we're talking about here is something that really does evoke the meadows and grasslands, things that might be considered wastelands because of their abundance of weeds and wildflowers, but they're actually these wonderlands. So when dabbling with perfume making, I ponder the use of erigeron, otherwise known as fleabane essential oil. So I purchased it from the sadly shuttered perfume supply house called White Lotus Aromatics. Any of you out there who are independent perfumers may be familiar with that business, and we've mourned their retirement. Fleabane flowers should be familiar to anyone who has studied meadows or even abandoned lots, these little diminutive daisy-like flowers that grow in groups. It was described somewhere that the essential oil was one of the hidden gems of the fragrance world, so I had to experience it. And I was stunned by its pastoral quality. There you go, pastoral. Very much a bright, ethereal wildflower scent with a rooty, celeriac undertone. So during my experimentations, I wasn't sure exactly how I could effectively integrate it into a composition, but fast forward a number of years later, and here we are, Marc-Antoine Corticchiato, who also composed Oeillères, which I will be sharing with you all a little bit, ingeniously incorporated into Mal-Aimé. He also includes Inula graveolens. So Inula graveolens is this aromatic and aromatherapeutic herb native to the Mediterranean, and has this beautiful, vibrant teal color because of the azulines and chamazulines in them, in this essential oil. Furthermore, there was a nettle accord with this herby, minty, spiky, tonic kind of quality. Mal-Aimé is the fragrance I wish I could have created, because I had frequent ideas of making a weed, not that kind of weed, fragrance, showcasing all of the aromatic plants that have not found their place in classic nor modern perfumery. So specifically, I was fascinated with the idea of using essential oils more commonly used in the practice of clinical aromatherapy. Why haven't these been explored for, perfume making? So Corticchiato, he achieved this with Mal-Aimé, with a greenness that isn't a galbanum, nor lawn grass green, but rather the greens of the weeds, the wildflowers that are sweet, pungent, medicinal, ethereal, like distilled chlorophyll, dried by the sun. And in the heart, I'm reminded of two things that I love: elderflowers, both the fresh and distilled ones that are made into a syrup and added to a seltzer. And also something that some of you may be familiar with out there, Dr. Brown's Celery soda, CEL-RAY. So for those who know, there's a cult favorite celery flavored soda called Celery, made by Dr. Brown's. And this reminds me of its taste and aroma. There's also this medicinal and spiky, smooth, sort of a little bit of bitterness in the stage, and it becomes just a bit sweeter and powdery. And here's a word for you. Look up your dictionary. Sometime bring up your dictionaries. Rhizomatous, meaning root-like. I love my vocabulary. These words, they're meant to be used. I love it. Rhizomatous. It is rhizomatous in the dry down. So this must be sort of the orris root in the base, or it's perhaps lifted with a bit of the couple of other perfume materials, Orivone and Irival. So that's for my perfumery nerds. So this is a spectacular creation that speaks to me greatly, and I only wish I could have beaten Corticchiato to it. He's just masterful in his work. The next one that we have here is Seville. Seville from L'Artisan Parfumeur 2012. Unfortunately discontinued. Sorry, FOMO alert. But it's gorgeous. Wonderful stuff. This takes me to a place I've never been before. The opening is heady, green, honeyed, waxy. It's spellbinding to my nose. There's this languorous beauty that evokes the advent of summertime as the temperatures rise and all the fragrances of the trees, the blossoms, they stir up a balm in the air. This filtered sun, it radiates through petitgrain leaves, baking them in the late May air, while the distinct herbal, unctuous presence of olive blossoms is thick and pendulous. While the development of Seville Lobe it's arguably linear, there are suggestions of benzoin and olibanum that come to the fore after about an hour. The beeswax, it settles, and overall the experience becomes rounder, softer, and the orange blossom takes center stage, beaming and sweet, with perhaps the benzoin contributing to the shift. And the wanderlust in me yearns for more when wearing this beautiful fragrance. There's so much more to experience, so many travels that lie ahead, and too much time passing me by. So yeah, that's Seville Lobe. It's a beautiful color, right? Next I have from Dissol 2016. This is Terram. This was released in 2020. This immediately conjures up the headspace of a coniferous forest and the undergrowth below, including the sweet sap of understory deciduous trees, like the autumnal fading of vegetation, the needles and the cones that carpet the floor. I recognize the smell as being that from this base made by Roberto called Bois de Lange, which literally means woodland. And it's one of my favorite bases in my own collection of Parfumer's materials. It is a co-extraction of French pine resinoid and Virginia cedarwood oil. So its scent profile consists of fruity, berry, blackcurrant facets. So I'm talking about the Bois de Land itself. Balsam fir, suggestions of spruce tips, and the scent of gold pine straw, just the fallen pine needles. So that's used in this, as far as I know. I'm convinced that the perfumer used it, but even if she didn't, and the name escapes me as the name of the perfumer, but if she could do something remarkable as this, I want to keep her on my radar. Whatever accord she did create, if she didn't use Bois de Lance, it's just as utterly heavenly. It's anchored by a patchouli and benzoin forward amber, and that further amplifies this effect. It feels damp, almost peaty, reminding me of the childhood exploration of decaying stumps and looking up to see the tall eastern white pines reaching up into the heavens like sacred spires. I'm just so lucky that I had woods in my backyard growing up. That's something I don't take for granted. Terram has a meditative quality to it. Its melody is that of nature itself, in earnest, not a sketch or cartoon or a caricature. It truly feels like an ode to the woods, from the treetops to the ground, in which roots reach far and deep, with thousands of miles of mycelium interwoven in an impossible to fathom network of communication. It nods in reverence to the forest as our primeval home, while never feeling like treacly adulation. It feels steady, warm, and confident in its strides. It is the great blue heron of the marsh, rather than the shrieking red-tailed hawk. It's a slow burner, and once all the resins, coppice, and earth recede, what's left in the bare, dry heartwood of the surrounding trees, with whispers of the future saplings germinated in tomorrow's forest cathedral. It is at that time that I look forward to wearing Terram all over again. And it's just wonderful. Next is from John Biebel, January Scent Project. This is Burvuvu from 2018. And as you probably already noticed, I spend a lot of time in the woods. My partner and I, we wander through the paths and tune into our surroundings, removing ourselves from the artifice of human existence. I run my hands across the moss, focus in on the lichen to the point where I almost see the tiny tardigrades swimming about teddy bear-like on their surface. I smell all that I can. I shove my nose into, swamp azaleas and spice bush and old logs and all the fungi and mysterious organisms that lie between animal and plant. So Burvuvu, to me, evokes so much of this. It opens with an immediate rose, slightly fermented and adhered to ancient trees, arresting and sharp, moving into the forest further. Old growth, aging wood, clusters of honey mushrooms and inky caps. It feels more damp over time, with the rose feeling more like pelargonium leaves. So pelargonium is the geranium leaves, the geranium that we know of in perfume. They're immersed in this deep humus. There's facets of propolis, beeswax, and tacky pine sap that follow. The cedars here, so John uses 3 of them, are what flesh it all out. And it may very well be the Holy Grail cedar, as it is more John Muir cedar than a Disney cedar, for which I've become so accustomed to in perfume. It includes the less pure, more camphorous aspects that you're, not just really the wood, but also the distinct aroma of the needles, the vegetation that is part of the cedar trees. And then a castoreum, it further amplifies that experience. It's inky, it's a bit dirty and warm. Burvuvu is both enchanting and bittersweet to me. My heart flutters and yet aches. It has me wanting to reassess, regroup, and get back to my roots. It is returning me to the source of my love for scent and has me considering a paradigm shift. And therein lies the power of fragrance. It can overcome all the superfluous chatter, overanalyzing, overthinking, if we allow it to. And I think this is a masterpiece. Next is a release from way back in 1989 from Etro. And this is an older bottle. I can't speak to the more recent versions of this that also have this beautiful shade of green. I actually think it's a deeper shade of green, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not familiar with the newer formulations. This is Palais Jamais. Palais Jamais is the moor and heath in a bottle. So the highlands with high rains and lowlands with blazing sun. It starts damp, fertile, with grasses, hay, dewy citrus, and sun showers. The petit grain is muted in pewter mist and smoky clary sage. The imagery in mine includes that of plants with tendrils, ivy perhaps, clinging to ancient stone or abandoned wooden churches and structures of all types. I wanted this, I wanted to evoke in my description this view perhaps from, a porch, sipping tea, overcoming the shell shock of a far too frenzied and hectic world we live in. And I get to come home to this. And some music that accompanies Palais Jamais, Brian Eno and Harmonia's Lüneburg Heath. If you want to look that up and listen to it, that's the music that comes to mind to me. I often tie music into fragrance. I also think of the mid-70s Genesis albums as well. It's sort of a proggy fragrance. The heart has hints of jasmine in its tea and smoky woods. And as the morning turns to midday, the sun sheds the dampness and dries the landscape, including the mosses, and the vetiver comes into relief. But it's tempered by all the tea and leathery birch, oaky bark, the vegetal sunny heath. The mist is now completely clear, and the dry down reveals this rawness of the oak moss and vetiver, fully immersed in this auric musk. Dusty, smoky, faded greens, and an ever-changing landscape is what we find in this Never Palace, and it's singular. What a scent. Roberto Greco has some fantastic releases. There's a new one that was just released that I'm excited to sample. Roque, which was composed by Christopher Sheldrake. We do have yet again Marc-Antoine Corticchiato here with Oeillères. In this, I'm surrounded by pollen, weeds, reeds, all manners of flora and fauna, as if to escape from the madness of humanity. The sun warms my face. I learn what a zephyr really is as it attempts to escape in the cool air. And chamomile, daisies, asters, tansy, yarrow, all these wildflowers, they gesticulate and release their comforting, sedative balm. The sound I hear is that of eastern bluebirds, red-winged blackbirds, bobolinks, tree sparrows. And there are desiccated wildflowers and herbs as if collected, faded colors, all that is hazy and languid. And I'm sitting on a bale of hay with timothy grass in my mouth and a tear forming in my eye as I watch the cows ruminate in the pasture with their sweet eyes. Oeillères grows more animalic and visceral over time, but ever more beautiful. The styrax and castoreum, unctuous, oily, furry, musky, adorned with sweet clovers. The chamomile calm persists, and all is textured, impasto painted, thick, tactile, running one's fingers over the beauty of impermanence. The blossoms inevitably lead to decay, and the cycle begins again. To wilt is as beautiful and precious as it is to bloom. As dusk swallows the day, I hear the whippoorwill. If one enjoys raw naturalism in fragrance and the more agrestic qualities of other fragrances, such as Aromatics Elixir, which could be an honorable mention here, Yatagan, which I'll be discussing soon, and even the Styrax Heavy Dry Down of Bellamy, they would likely appreciate Oeillères. It's a limited edition of 500, so maybe I shouldn't hype it up too much. I don't know if there's any more left now that I think of it. But it's really It's stellar. It's beautiful. And why don't we talk about Yatagan? So Yatagan from Caron, 1978 release. One of my true loves. One day, number of years ago, I walked into the legendary Colonial Drug in Newton, Massachusetts. I've mentioned it before. It was formerly in Harvard Square, Cambridge for decades. Here I would get my education on the classics, whether they be household names or those that were unsung. The owners have impeccable taste and have recommended so many of the scents that I now hold very dear to my heart. And during this one visit, I saw their display of Caron men's fragrances, and there stood Yatagan with the sepia-tinted juice, and it was just calling out my name. Joseph, I was meant for you. And I sampled it, and to my disbelief, it ignited all the pleasure synapses in my brain in a way no other fragrance, perhaps besides my early love, Habit Rouge, had ever done before. And have I found my own personal holy grail, I thought to myself. The opening is redolent of pine, camphoraceous herbs, dirt with that undercurrent of castoreum. And there's that rare instance of a fragrance to my nose being simultaneously sensual, primal, and cerebral. It's one of those handful of scents that just floods me with memories, actual and uncertain. This ineffable sensation that gives me a yearning of that which is out of reach, which isn't as sad as it may sound. It actually motivates the spirit to experience more. It's beautiful, and I would be remiss without mentioning it as far as AGRESTIC and BUCOLIC fragrances. There's a big place in my heart for Yatagan. And the next one, which I've actually done a separate video for, with a comparison of newer and older versions, is Aramis Devin from 1977. So I'm an outdoorsman. I'm a naturalist. I even consider myself a conservationist. I'm the type that when walking in the woods, I really have to drink it all in. I see a log with moss and lichen, mushrooms covering it. I get in close, examine it. I'm in awe of its splendor. I'm just in love with everything from the haunting calls of the owls and whippoorwills at night, to the loons, to the morbid and mysterious beauty of carrion beetles carrying out their work. And I admire the whole picture, the good, the beautiful, the bad, the ugly, and how all these tints and hues come together to spell out home to me. And that is why I find Devin to be so beautiful. We have the genius of Bernard Chant here. He tapped into all of these qualities through Devin. It doesn't smell clean. It isn't safe and antiseptic. It isn't really a city man's fragrance. This will not appeal to the blue fragrance lovers of today, at least not until their nose maybe acquires a taste for some more complexity. Devin was, through much of its existence, presented as a country eau de cologne, as you see here. And almost as a disclaimer, this is a country type of scent. This has since been removed from the labeling of the newer formulations, but the fragrance remains pretty intact. Just check out my video on the Devin comparisons for more info on that. The pine note here is a real standout for me. It's not a hackneyed isobornyl acetate. That's another thing for you perfume making nerds. It's not one of those heavy accords, but rather this more dynamic pine of needles, resins, sap, bark, and wood. And we do know that pine and artemisia were often paired together in the men's chypres of the day. We think corum as well. But here, they really somehow stand out as technicolor, albeit with many muted and tawny shades thrown in. In the galbanum, it brings out this truly green and soapy quality of the pine needles and broken leaves. With the cinnamon, and it's not really candied and rough, it just brings out the woodier qualities of the pine, that cinnamon. So yeah, I had to mention Devin as well for this series of fragrances. It's definitely, it embodies the AGRESTIC. This is a 2023 release that I'd like to share. This is from Miskio, Fiu. This is the breeze shifting the wildflowers and the weeds in this expansive land on the sanctuary I frequent in my town. It stirs the scent of the heated phloem in the leaves and the stems, the flowers ranging from the size of a pinhead to that of my hand, all swaying, all seducing flying creatures into their coronas. Linden trees along the perimeter produce their pollen and their sensuous nectar in early summer, adding to the bouquet in the atmosphere. Chamomile and fleabane, we have that fleabane again, lovely stuff. Yarrow and mugwort, they too are the chorus for this theater of abundance. Feuille is intensely vegetal, weedy, and stemmy, and I adore it for all of that. This is the culmination of all I ever hoped and wished for in a fragrance that honors wildflowers, weeds, and rogue vegetation. The crispness, it softens just somewhat for a time. It opens up to a distant waft of acacia and what reminds me of honey locust, the honey locust blossoms on the trees. And what's notable about Marie-Pierre Blanchette's use of Coeur Racine, which is a perfume material which I'm familiar with and quite fond of, it evokes this deep green, moist plant fibers in the cortex, the flavor of nasturtium in aromatic form, pea pods, green bell peppers, snap stems. And furthermore, a juicy violet leaf accord moves forward as well. It's watery green, cooling, and calm. This connects me to the wonder of my childhood that I still carry with me today, as evidenced in a lot of my photography that I share on Instagram, honing in on the details of nature, the tiny flora and fauna, bees, hoverflies, shy beetles. They become my friends, if only for a few moments, before I move on to a new rock or flower or tree. This is astounding, and oh God, it's great. It will surely be a favorite release of mine for 2021. All right, and the last one that I want to chat with you about is probably my favorite of all of these, very dear to my heart. This is Chypre Mousse, allegedly released by Oeillères in 1914, and I believe it was relaunched in 2014. So contrary to the popular belief amongst the fragrance community that no ferns truly give off a fragrance and then it's merely a fantasy note, there are species that actually do, such as the eastern hay-scented fern, which is native to this area, and the fragrant wood fern. The woods are my church, and I know this truth intimately. Walking through those ferns along the trails and taking in their ivy green, coumarinic scent along with the damp earth and the forest canopy. The fern note here captures this incredibly so. This is the quintessential scent of the undergrowth. It may be inaccessible to many out there who like more of a Disney forest with no underbelly, no decay, just all vibrant colors and clean lines delineating sky and tree to plant and tree to plant to ground. The truth is, in the forest, it is inherently unclean, untidy. A network of mycelium communicating with each other in the trees, the organized chaos that the human mind might be somewhat overwhelmed with. This fragrance pays homage to that, and few fragrances captivate me like Chypre Mousse. I just love the cornucopia of the herbs in the opening, the sweet pungent fennel contrasting with the fresh sensation of mint, the aromatic clary sage and the musky green angelica, and in the heart as we scale the perimeter of the meadows adjacent to the woods, the fields of mature clovers and all these various wildflowers entering dormancy. The mastic and the galbanum seem to provide a valuable contribution to this particular effect. And we really begin to experience the loam and the humus that anchors all the flora, entering deeper into the forest, deeper into the oceans of scented ferns. So it's worth noting that what is overarching throughout is the oak moss and the mushrooms. It's a very well rendered mushroom accord here. However, they take center stage after a couple hours. Very earthy, very agrestic. And then I discern a mildly sweet, meaty chestnut, pine resins, grounding labdanum and vetiver, just blissful, dreamy, lingering into the evening. A moss trace, it still remains the following morning on my skin. And Chypre Mousse is a rare feat of complexity and longevity, a resurrected century-plus-old formula that is truly transcendent in my humble opinion. I feel at home with this one. And of course, we have a number of honorable mentions, Tusita Zerawan, Santa Maria Novellas Fieno, Afternoon of a Fawn, and several more that I have here. Now, I have reviews for all of these fragrances, and you can check out those reviews on Base Notes and Fragrantica, or even just on Instagram. I have a hashtag that's devoted to all of those reviews, hashtag JJ Colborn Reviews, and you can check out all the reviews that I have posted there. So that will be it. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did enjoy it, feel free to subscribe and click the like button and hit the bell notification so that you can be notified of future videos. There will be more coming up. And until next time, I hope that all of you are in good health and in good spirits, and I will talk to you again soon.